Welcome to Nomad, Volume 1, Episode 2, Philip and Bartholomew. Last episode, we talked about the brothers Andrew and Peter, and so this week we're going to talk about another set of apostles that had a relationship before they met Christ. Philip and Bartholomew, also known as Nathanael, were friends before Philip had the interaction with Jesus. It was Philip that went to Bartholomew and told him that they had found the Messiah in John 1:43-45. It is assumed that Philip was the other apostle of John the Baptist before he became Jesus's, because the passages of Andrew's calling and Philip's calling are so close. But it's all just speculation, but still interesting to think about. There isn't a whole lot in the Gospels about these two, but there's enough to gather some solid information about who they were. Let's focus on Philip first. Did you know that there are actually 4 Philips that are in the Bible? 2 of them were sons of Herod. That had to be really confusing growing up in that household. And then there was also Philip the Apostle, who we're talking about, and then there was Philip the Evangelist. There's a common misconception that Philip the Evangelist and the Apostle were the same person, but a closer look will show you that they are 2 different people. Philip the Apostle was only mentioned 8 times in the New Testament, and 7 of those being in the Gospels. So here's some fast facts about Philip the Apostle. Philip is a Greek name. He was from Bethsaida, the same town as Andrew and Peter. When the apostles are traveling in that area, some Greeks approached Philip as referenced in John chapter 12, verse 20-22, and they want to meet Jesus. They may have approached him because he knew them or because he spoke better Greek than the other apostles. Last week we had talked about Andrew in the same situation. Philip went to Andrew, and then they both took the Greeks to Jesus. He was also a person who took the individuals to Jesus. John went into a greater detail than all the other Gospels when he goes into the Gospel stories. When Jesus saw the crowd of 5,000 coming towards him in John 6, 5-7, he tested Philip in asking him, how are we going to feed all these people? Philip was practical and answered thinking with a worldly mindset, we ain't got enough money for that. Same, Philip. Same. However, he didn't realize who he was talking to. Jesus already had a plan. A miracle was about to happen. John illustrating this conversation shows that it had to be divine because feeding that many people was impossible for what worldly resources they had. Now, Philip the Evangelist was a different person because in Acts chapter 6, verses 2-4, it states that the 12, which would have included Philip the Apostle because he was listed as one of the 12 all 4 times they were listed in the Gospels. The apostles had chose 7 men to serve, and in Acts 6:5, a different Philip was chosen to be one of the 7. We would commonly refer to those 7 as deacons now. The story of Philip and the eunuch, that was about Philip the deacon, not Philip the apostle. So like I mentioned earlier, Bartholomew was introduced to Jesus by Philip. The name Bartholomew means son of Ptolemy or son of the furrows. So that could mean he was born the son of a plowman or a farmer. He was born in the region of Canaan in Galilee, which was known to have many farming communities, so it would make sense. When Philip told Bartholomew about Jesus, his response was, to say the least, a little shocking. In John 1:46, he responded, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Ooh, ouch. Talk about some blunt honesty. He still went along, though, and met with Jesus, and Jesus greeted him by saying, "Here is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Jesus knew what he had said and knows that Bartholomew was a man that spoke what was on his mind. Jesus called him out and said that he saw him at the fig tree before Philip got to him, and it was then that Bartholomew believed. Some scholars even say that Jesus was making a wisecrack at him to not judge a person based on their past heritage or where they come from, because the whole lineage of Israel comes from a liar, or Jacob. Other than that, like I said, there's not a whole lot that we know about him. There isn't a lot of biblical record, but he must have been pretty important to be counted as one of Jesus' closest followers. Tradition states that Philip headed north to Greece, Syria, and Phrygia, which is in modern-day Turkey now, to spread the gospel in those areas. It's a little murky as to how these guys died, but it wasn't pretty either way. The more widely accepted tradition states that he was in Hierapolis, which is modern-day Turkey, and had led the proconsul's wife to Christ. Well, proconsul didn't really like that too much, and he ordered both him and Bartholomew crucified upside down. So while hanging, Philip continued to preach and move the crowd to release them, but Philip only told them to free his companion, but he declined the freedom for himself, or as the story goes. Bartholomew traveled further out than any other apostles, reaching out towards India, but also to Laconia, Mesopotamia, Persia, and Phrygia. He ended his journeys in Armenia, where tradition states that he was flayed alive by whips and beheaded. There's some other stories out there that he was crucified upside down, but I think that comes from when he traveled with Philip in his time in Hierapolis. And there are some other stories that said that he was killed in his missionary journeys in India. So this concludes episode 2 of Nomad Apostles. Tune in next time. We'll be talking about the sons of Zebedee, or the sons of thunder. Thanks, and we'll see you then.